For me, the journey to the Alexander technique began with a physical calamity, a physical catastrophe. And many people are faced with physical calamities, whether sudden injuries, disabilities, life-threatening diagnoses, chronic pain. And often that's when we're at our lowest point, and that's when we're really searching for something that can help us. And when we're most open to new techniques and new modalities that we might not be open to otherwise. So for me, that happened when I woke up from surgery in 1995 with the left side of my body paralyzed from a stroke that had happened during the surgery that was actually caused by the surgery. A little piece of tissue had broken away from the surgical site, traveled to my brain, blocked blood to the neurons that were controlling movement, and I woke up with the left side of my body completely paralyzed. And as with any stroke or anything like that, people never know how you're going to recover or if you're going to recover, and I didn't know. The conventional medical system approaches stroke with occupational and physical therapy, which is what happened with me. And after a couple of months of that, I actually began to regain some movement in my arm and leg, and I could walk unsteadily. I was still quite disabled, but things were coming back. I was getting encouraged, thinking I can do this. And at that point, the insurance company doctor, who had never met me, called up and said, well, we've reviewed your records here, and it seems like you have now plateaued, meaning I had reached a certain point in my recovery. I was now going to plateau. And he said, we really don't think you're going to go much further than this, and the benefits are stopping. And we don't think, now you should learn to adapt to your disabilities, so to whatever you have left. So what adapting means is, if you've had a stroke, you wear shoes with Velcro so you don't have to tie them. You have a device that holds down a tomato so that you can slice it with your other hand. There are driving adaptations. There are wheelchairs for long walks through the airport. And basically, I was being told by the conventional medical system to settle down and accept what I had and learn to live with it. And at that point, for me, it wasn't enough. I was in my 40s, I had 2 young children, I had a career as a writer, and I wasn't about to live the rest of my life as an invalid. And so I needed to go on a healing journey. I needed to find other alternatives to conventional medicine, not to reject conventional medicine, but to add to it. And the Alexander technique was one of the most powerful alternatives I found. And I have fully recovered now. It's 8 or 9 years later, and I feel that the Alexander technique was a very important player in that recovery. After my first lesson, I felt like I didn't know really what had just happened. All I did mostly was stand up and sit down, and I didn't quite understand why I was doing that. But I did feel that it was easier somehow to stand up and sit down after the lesson. From what I had heard, it had to do with moving your body effortlessly and without pain. And in my own recovery from my stroke paralyzed the left side of my body, and so as I began to be able to move it again, it was uncomfortable. There was pain in other parts of my body as well as the parts I was trying to move again. And it appealed to me as a non-invasive way to strengthen my body. And I began to be able to move more freely, with more strength. My body felt more balanced. And when you're recovering from a stroke, those are important things. I continued to study the Alexander technique. It became, over time, one of the 2 or 3 major modalities, healing modalities, that I came to rely on. And the reason I continued was because I was seeing results. I was trying to strengthen the left side of my body, and I was doing it by tightening the right side and just going completely off balance and having a lot of pain. And what I learned was to somehow tap into I still don't quite understand it, but to the inner core of strength of my body and connecting the left side to the rest of my body. I was kind of seeing it as the villain that wouldn't do things. And it was a bad arm, it was a bad leg. And instead of doing that, I learned to connect it to the rest of my body and realize that it was all connected, and in fact could gain strength from the rest of my body. What I learned from the Alexander technique seemed to have implications for everything I was doing in life. Just small things like reaching to put a glass away in a cabinet, reaching up, reaching down. I became more aware of everything I was doing, which is why I still think this is the most powerful technique of the many alternative methods that I used, because it seems to pervade every aspect of life. I use it also in sitting at the computer, which I do a lot, and writing, and which can create a lot of tension. And just simply the way I sit is different, the way I move is different. When I was sitting at my kitchen table one day doing my occupational therapy exercises, which involved picking up little pieces of putty balls from one piece of paper and putting them down in another piece of paper, which sounds easy, but it's not easy if you've had a stroke, because you can't pick them up and then you can't let them go when you've got them. And I was feeling very discouraged, and my daughter, who was then 9, who had appointed herself my personal trainer to help me do this, said to me, well, you know, a daughter always needs her mother, but sometimes a mother needs her daughter too, which was very sweet and very loving and wonderful, but it actually made me realize that no matter how much people around you love you and want to help you, in the end, this is something we have to do ourselves. And I began to see an image, which is interesting because I never see images, but I'm not an image person, but I had an image in my mind of a road that forked in 2 directions and forked off, and as the roads diverged, they got farther and farther apart. And it looked to me as if there was a road sign pointing in one direction of the road that said, give up. And I saw where that road led to being an invalid, and being in a wheelchair, being an invalid for the rest of my life. And I knew I didn't want that road. The other road said, fight back, don't give up. You couldn't see where that road led, but I knew it wasn't the invalid road. And I felt like at that moment I had to make a decision which road I was going to take. Right at that moment I needed to decide, was I going to give up or was I not? And what I decided was going to have implications for what happened for the rest of the time that I was in a recovery period. And that's a very Alexander moment, actually. One of my teachers explained this to me, because by choosing not to do something, in fact, you were allowing your body to do something. So I was choosing not to go down the road to disability. I didn't know what the other road led to, but it wasn't the disability road. It wasn't the giving up and despair road. And what it did was free me to go down the other road and to discover what lay there. And that's, I think, what I understand to be the essence of the Alexander technique, is choosing not to do something and then seeing what happens with that new freedom. And that's really what led me to recovering. As part of my recovery, I actually wrote a book that would, I hope, help other people in similar journeys, not just for stroke, but dealing with cancer, heart disease, pain, injury, menopause, childhood illnesses, and even just the problems of aging. And it talks about many modalities, including the Alexander technique. There's a chapter devoted to that. And the book is called Own Your Health, because I feel like that's what we all need to do in order to get well and to heal, is to own our own health and to make our own journeys and find out what will be helpful to us. And this book was really the book I wished that I'd had when I woke up in the hospital and half my body was paralyzed. It's what I needed, and that's why I wrote it, to help other people. And in the actual writing of it, it helped me as well, because I learned many things, and I came to realize even more how important it is to own your health. I meet people all the time, actually, doing a lot of talking about my book and talking to different groups and being interviewed, and just people I know. I hear of people all the time, and I want to say to them, have you tried the Alexander technique? And I do say that, and usually they don't know what it is, and I try to explain it. But especially people who deal with pain, and I think what I learned from writing this book is we have a whole chapter on pain, that it's the 3rd largest health problem in this country, behind cancer and heart disease, is people who suffer from chronic pain. And it costs a lot of money in terms of lost employment and lost productivity, not to mention the healthcare system trying to take care of these people, and really unsuccessfully, pills or surgery sometimes. And it really, I think, so much is based on how they're using their body. And there's a story that I used in my book. I interviewed an Alexander teacher who talked about a woman who had such chronic pain, she was a psychiatrist, had such chronic pain that she almost needed an epidural daily in order to function, to be able to function. And that was the best that the conventional medical system could do for her. And Alexander's lessons helped her realize that, in fact, when she replicated what happened when she was sitting and listening to her patients talk about their lives or their despair or their anguish, she was unconsciously sitting in a way that tightened her back, tightened her neck, because she was responding to their misery. And she would be doing this for hours every day, sitting with her back and her neck compressed and tightened. And simply through Alexander lessons, by having her teacher put the teacher's hand on her back or her neck or her shoulders where she saw tightening, she began to realize what she was doing consciously for the first time, bringing this into conscious awareness, this habit of tightening. And she began to let that go and release that and to learn how to listen to her patients and be empathic without tightening her back. And in fact, over a period of time, the pain disappeared and she no longer needed pain medication. And I found that such a powerful story, which is why I put it in the book, because it's so clear that she had control over this pain and she didn't realize it.